Hi, everybody. Welcome to There's No Crying in Crochet with me, Debbie, MadameStitch, and Biz,
I'm Busy Crochet. Yes.
And we are here today to tell you that we want you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channels because when you do, you get a notification every time we post a new video. When we go live, you get a notification that we're going to go live. And when we post a new tutorial, because this isn't the only thing we do, you get a notification to go check it out. And we highly recommend that you do that. We've already subscribed to Busy Crochet and MadameStitch Crochet. So go find us. They are linked in the descriptions for each of our channels. So make sure that you do that. And if you are watching us live in Facebook, be sure that you give StreamYard permission to display your name because Facebook user isn't very personal. We'd really like to know who we're talking to. So check it out. They don't share anything personal. They just let us see your name and that's it. Right? All right. That's all the biz that we have, Biz. So
all
what's
the
been
biz.
That's the biz. So Biz, what has your week been like? What have you been
our
up
week, continuing the saga of the husky puppy. She is beginning to learn things. So I can't remember if I've told you on here or not, but we babysit my daughter's 9-month-old husky puppy, who's the size of a cow. Every day. And so she came with pretty much no training at all. So now we're working on commands and obedience and all kinds of things. And she's very lovable, but very naughty in some respects. But she likes treats. She is very treat motivated. So we are she's doing really well with her training. I'm expecting great things from her. But because of that, I then have to go outside with puppy dogs and sit there to make sure that she doesn't, eat things she shouldn't eat. Because she likes bugs and lizards and everything. And so I came in from my little break outside with no less than at least 10 mosquito bites. So I apologize if you see me frantically scratching. I've even got 2 on my forehead. So it's just, it's the nature of the beast of living in Florida. The mosquitoes are as big as the birds down here in some respects. And then there's the no-see-ums, which literally you can't see them. You just feel the itch for days.
The no-see-um, I thought when you mentioned that to me, that was an official insect name. No-see-um, they just get you. I get it now.
Yes, and they're awful. They're worse than the mosquitoes because their itch lasts longer. They're horrible. What you gonna do though?
Well, you could live where I live. You could try that.
It's too cold for me there.
Oh no. Oh my goodness. Well, it might be right now because we've had an unusually cold's not the right word. Cool and non-rainy.
Dry, cool and dry.
April, May, June. In fact, today it's humid because it's trying to rain. But it's not being very successful. It's these spritz when you take the dog out that you go, oh, that's not bad. And then you come back and you have to change clothes, But we still haven't experienced, and this is totally unusual for the end of June, we still haven't experienced mosquitoes.
Oh my gosh.
We've got the wasps and bumblebees are out because my butterfly bush is about to bloom. But we haven't had any of that kind of, we get black flies, gnats that hang in a cloud around your head. None of that yet. Yeah, it's really fun.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah. But today it's 69 and the high is supposed to be 85. So it's just weird weather, but I'm not going to complain because probably in a few weeks when it's 90 and humid, I'll go, oh my gosh.
I sure wish it was 69.
Exactly. Anyway, enough about the weather.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
Um,
Like, life just boils down to what's your weather like?
well, when we spend actually a fair amount of time outside because our
Mhm.
dog, who's an 18-pound mini Aussie Doodle, has if she only gets 2 miles of a walk in a day, she has 3 walks a day. So if her
Mhm.
walks don't total more than 2 miles, we feel like we've gypped her. So her big walk is usually 2 to 4 miles, and then we do a mile stretch and then a mile stretch.
Mhm.
So she's great exercise for us.
Yeah, I
She's
bet.
crazy.
I
But
bet.
that would be the pits if it were Mosquito City around here. Ugh.
Yeah,
I
we're
would
looking for
be
some alternative.
one big red welt, darling. One big red welt.
And they always say that they go for the sweetest blood. I'm like, I must be made of sugar then.
You must be amazing. We're just gonna go with that.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, enough about the weather because anybody watching in the winter will go, "What are they talking about? What is that?" So, anyway, all
Yeah.
right, let's get into our show. I'm excited about this one. This is episode 8. I can't believe this. It's already episode 8. This is
Yeah, I know it.
crazy. We've
We're
spent
already
2
beating
months of
statistics for
Fridays.
other we're beating
I know.
statistics for other podcasts, so hey, yes.
Well, we're just those people. All right, today we're going to give you as many tips as we possibly
Mhm.
can, and I think there are 6, on how to crochet a straight edge every time. All
Yes.
right, Biz, do
Yes.
you happen to have a story about a time when you were making a panel or a square or something that was supposed to be parallel sides and it ended
Mhm.
up doing one of these guys? Did
Mhm.
you ever do one of
Absolutely.
Yep.
Back when I started, it was, okay, so going back quite a few years because I got rid of a lot of my straight line issues when I was fairly young. But I do remember specifically when I was quite young, I used to make Barbie clothes for my dolls.
Ooh,
And
nice.
it was just, like doing what I wanted because I didn't have any patterns or anything like that. So, years later, I pulled that stuff out of a box and I looked at it and I went, "Oh my God, what is this?" Because I can actually see in the work itself where I started like this wide. It was about this wide when I got to the top. And I'm quite sure that I was just not working that end stitch and it just I went, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess this is gonna be this thing," and just use it for whatever on my Barbies. But yeah, it's amazing how much missing that one stitch will alter
Oh,
the thing you're making.
oh, yeah, or you find that you hold it up and you've got this bubble over here, "What the heck was that?" You know? So,
I
we're gonna
still do
try
that
to
sometimes.
and what do you do when you find that? You either hide it or you
Yeah.
frog it,
Oh,
right?
I tend to frog because 'cause I'm such a perfectionist.
Yeah, I've learned that about you. I don't hide it unless unless it's easily hidden. But anyway,
Yeah.
I digress. All right, tip number 1, Biz.
Yes.
Start and end each row in the same place. You already alluded to that, so
Mhm.
give me a piece of advice.
So when we are, making our straight rows, we're just gonna talk as though we're making everything in single crochet at the moment.
Okay?
So where you start your row, like we've got some stuff on here. Is the first stitch worked in the same stitch or in the next stitch? So when you're starting your row, in a single crochet, most times, right after you chain one and turn, that very first stitch is going to be where your stitch goes. It's going to alter though when we have half double crochet or double crochet.
Mhm.
So each time that you make that turn, you're going to always want to start in that first one, unless the instructions tell you something different.
Right, so we're hoping that our designer in the pattern notes or in the first line of instruction where that happens will tell you whether you work now, I usually in my patterns, I will write for single crochet particularly, if that turning chain does not count as a stitch, I'm gonna work it in the first stitch in the same stitch that the chain came out of.
Mhm.
So when a designer says single crochet in the same stitch and in each stitch across, they
Mhm,
mean don't skip that stitch where the chain is because then
mhm,
you'll get a gap. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about this later in the episode, but you mentioned that the turning chain sometimes will count as a stitch, and
mhm.
usually that's with taller
The taller ones.
stitches. Yeah. Half double crochet, I go back and forth. It sort of depends upon how it looks in my work, as to whether I um, count that chain one, and sometimes it's chain two. So if I'm
Mhm,
going to count it as a stitch, I will chain two to give it a little more heft so
mhm,
that when I do skip that stitch that it's in, I don't get that big gap.
mhm,
But anything taller than a half double crochet, most of the time it's going to count as a stitch.
mhm.
And in
I
that case,
mhm. I tend to, personally, because I hate holes anywhere, I have a tendency to, if I'm making a half double crochet and they're telling me that they want me to make the chain 2, the stitch, I will just chain 1 and I'll put a half double crochet in that same spot, and I don't get any bulk on the side.
yeah.
But that comes with some practice and, taking your time with it. But, yeah, one of the ways that you and I have talked about dealing with, are we moving on to that?
Well, I think you're skipping to a tip that's further down the
I
list.
am.
So let's do this. Since we've, I want to get my tips, all in a row here.
Yes.
Um, so the second tip we have is
Yes.
because we've alluded to our turning
Okay,
chain,
so
and
that's
you've
kind of
already
what I was
talked
talking
about
about.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Is adjusting the turning chain.
Mhm.
So speak to that with your half double crochet.
So yeah, just like I said, I usually will just chain 1 and then I'll do the half double crochet. And I'll do the same thing with the double crochet as well, depending on what it is. If it's something where I'm just creating a panel that I'm gonna maybe stitch together to make a sweater or something like that, I don't worry about whether or not that chain causes a bulky side.
Right.
But if this is something like a blanket where I want my edges to be very, very neat, I will make sure that I'm not creating an extra bulk. And I'll just maybe chain 2 just to bring it up a little bit, because it's not still the full height of your stitch. But I've also run into, patterns where they don't want you to chain anything at all, and they just want you to stick this stitch in there. And it's like the stitch kind of leans over like this on the end really bad.
Yeah,
So
it's
I will.
pulled.
Yes, and I don't
Mhm.
like that. So I have a tendency to add or start with some form of a turning chain just to bring it up because I kind of like my stitches upright. Um, Go ahead.
And if you're working with a blanket, like you just said, a
Yeah,
lot of times that blanket will have a border on it.
yeah.
Um, so that turning chain is too a little too flimsy
Mhm.
to work the first row of that border, whatever it happens to be, or even if there's just one row of single
Yeah.
crochet around the blanket, you want a little bit of heft to
Mhm.
support that stitch as you work into it, and that turning
Mhm.
chain tends to be the flimsiest way to do it. So adjusting that turning chain for whatever reason
Mhm.
will give you that clean edge, and you just have to experiment a little bit to
Yeah.
see what looks good. If the designer doesn't state that in the pattern, it's really okay to not do exactly what she says if you
Mhm.
get a better result
Yeah.
from what you are trying.
Yeah. And I would give yourself the freedom to experiment and see what
Mhm.
works the best for you. Um, we are very much, you and I, uh, follow the pattern, listen to the designer. They did it this way for a reason. However, there are certain circumstances when obviously, we have the right to adjust anything we want to anyway. That,
Mhm.
like, we're not going to sit here and say, well, you didn't follow the pattern. So, whatever. But we have the right to be creative when we're making anything. So in those circumstances where maybe you hate, like for me, I'm telling you, I hate holes. Unless they're supposed to be there, I don't want a hole. I hate edges that have holes. and I'm super anti against, like anti against them. That didn't make any sense at all. I am super anti hole. So when you're talking about doing
That
that,
sounds I think you should make a sign for that. That sounds like a really I am so anti I don't even
little
wanna go down
a little
that one.
protest
Yes,
sign.
go for it, yes. But anyway, I
Um,
interrupted you. Go ahead, finish that
no,
thought.
that's fine. But as far as that edge that you're talking about and that single crochet row that we start with, usually to establish a an edging row, and if it's got that double crochet edge, and they wanted you to use the double crochet as the stitch, and you now filled up that double crochet chain with single crochets, and now there's this big old hole in the middle of your blanket. It's not the middle, it's the edge. I don't care. But you've got this hole in your blanket that okay, so that's another reason why I do that, because over time I have developed what I do and don't like in the way that my work looks in the finished product. So, like I said, give yourself some time, give yourself the right to be a little
Mhm,
bit creative.
yep,
Allow yourself to kind of play with things and see what you like, what
yep,
makes you happy in the end product.
exactly.
So, because it is
I
all
really
about,
wish you would be more clear about how you feel about it, though. I mean,
I know it's super subtle. It's like I'm hiding behind a wall over here or something.
um, all right. Moving on from the anti-hole diatribe. Um,
Anti-hole.
the next tip we have, oh, this is one of my favorites, Biz,
Yes.
because this just makes my crochet life so much happier. It is substitute an alternate stitch for the turning chain. Okay, so generally, this is when you're working with a double crochet as the first stitch or
Mhm,
higher.
mhm,
And we're going to be talking about double crochet substitute, but I know that these two stitches that we're going to talk about can actually be adapted for
mhm,
taller stitches as well.
mhm. Yeah.
Would you like to explain what you use?
Personally, if I am going to extend a double crochet or replace it with another stitch, I use an extended single crochet. And an extended single crochet is a yarn over and you bring it up and you only go through one loop. And then you yarn over and you go through the two loops on the hook. So it actually just gives you one step up, finishes with a single crochet on the top. So the bottom part looks more like a tall chain. Um, I kind of like your version a little bit better.
Well, I was just going to say, I have worked with extended stitches as part of a pattern
Mhm,
before, as a stitch pattern, and it creates an interesting look
mhm,
to what would be normally, as you were talking about, a single crochet or a double crochet fabric. It gives it an interesting look because the stitches in a row slightly slant and
mhm.
slightly linked together. It's really cool. Mine is a little bit different, and I want to do a caveat before I explain this one. I think I might have seen this one described by another designer, and then I sort of put my own twist on it.
Mhm,
And you will find lots of different alternate stitches, tutorials from the top designers who have created their own take on what we're talking about here.
sure.
What I like to use is called a stacked single
Mhm,
crochet. So, really, if you think about how a regular double crochet is constructed, because there's a bar across the middle of it from that yarn over that you did for the first part of the stitch, it actually looks like and is the height of two single crochet.
mhm,
So a half double crochet would be somewhere 2/3 of the way up.
mhm,
So what I do is I start my stitch. I don't chain at all. I start my stitch as if I'm going to do a single crochet. So I yarn over, insert it in the stitch, draw yarn over and draw up a loop. And then I finish that single crochet without the initial chain. But
mhm,
then I insert my hook
mhm,
into the left bar of that single crochet, not both feet, but the left
Mhm.
foot, and then pull a loop up and finish the stitch as if it were a single crochet as well. So
Okay.
the only difficulty with it is that you get a slightly it's a slightly bulkier base because you've now
Mm.
pulled the leg a little bit to get the upper part of the stitch. But if you're working in a row of double crochet, it sort of hides itself. So it's sort of
Okay.
um, it doesn't bulk out to the
Yeah.
edge, and it creates no hole. So those
Yeah.
of us who are anti-hole are happy
Anti-hole.
campers.
Mhm.
But I love it. I was showing Biz. I'm working on this right now. Um, it's granny stitch, and each
Mhm.
row, every other row starts slightly differently. But you really can't tell, I hope, I'm
Mm-mm.
not holding it very well, where it's a double crochet and where it's a stacked single crochet
No, I can't see any
because
of it.
no. Now, if you did a close up, I think this is bulking out because of the yarn change right here, but
Sure.
it's pretty even
Mhm.
all the way through, and I'm not gonna have that's gonna be a seam, so now I've got a very, um, very sturdy, bunch of stitches to work that seam into.
Mhm.
So I love it because I use it in my granny squares because it
Mhm.
hides. If you look at a traditional granny square, you can see right where the chains are. They
Mm.
just kind of um, face you and look wonky to me, just because
Mhm.
that's what I'm used to seeing. But if I use a stacked single crochet, an extended single crochet would work for that as well.
Mhm.
It sort of hides where that join is
Mhm.
in my granny squares. So that's why I like it.
Have you ever used, standing double crochets?
Only when I'm doing another designer's work. So
Yeah, me
other
too.
designers use it. That's where you do a slip knot, start the stitch, and then
Mhm.
yeah, or
Kinda like you
what is
yarn
it?
over and you stick it through the hole, and then you kinda, like, have to hold everybody together and get it going,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's pretty okay. It's just not something
Yeah.
that I've actually added to my repertoire.
Right. I think it's just a personal choice. I know a
Mhm.
lot of designers who use that, and it again, it hides that turning chain, and
Yeah.
it's secure enough that you are able to, um, you can't pull it out.
Yeah, it makes a very clean finish, so I mean, I'm not opposed to it because 'cause I've definitely used it, and it's a good stitch
No,
for sure.
again,
One
I
thing it
think
was
it's a personal choice.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. One thing I was thinking about too, when you were showing your example, and I just happen to have something over here that I worked on for last Christmas's blanket. It was one of my samples, but the edges on it, as far as using different stitches and stuff like that, like here is one of those ones where it started with like a chain four for a treble crochet,
Mhm.
and then it went double, half, single, etc. on down. The one thing I wanted to point out as far as keeping all of this straight, even though I'm changing colors, is making sure that you're working into the correct chain. When you're
Mhm.
coming up on having to work into a chain, that you make sure that you, if it's a treble, you're working into the fourth loop. If it's a double, you're working into the third loop, etc. That you're not working either too far down or not into the chain at all. Because sometimes we look at it and we go, well, wait, am I supposed to put a stitch in that? Like where, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And if you skip that chain, you're going to lose a stitch every single row. Another,
Yeah.
which actually takes us to tip number 4.
Well, yes. Okay. So tip number 4 is count, count, then count some more. Okay. So nobody wants to take the time to count, right?
Uh-uh.
Nobody wants to, you want to, I don't know about anybody else, but personally, when I sit down to crochet, I want to just be chilling out. I really just don't want to have to pay attention
Yep.
beyond making the correct stitches. But it is to your advantage to count at
Mhm.
least every few rows, because then if you discover that you don't have the right number of stitches, you
Yep.
only have a couple, 3 rows to frog.
Yeah.
to fix the mistake rather than that edge. That's
Yeah.
about 10, 15 rows back.
Yeah. Because
Like,
by
"Wait,
then
what
you're like, "Oh
happened?
my god."
Oh, I'm missing 20 stitches. What is
Yeah.
that?"
Yeah, and I always feel really bad when I see pictures, they're like, "What happened? What did I do?" And it's like,
I just
"Oh."
wanna get on and go, "Here's what you didn't do. Did you
Yeah.
count back there at that row?" But
Yeah.
I don't wanna be snarky,
Well,
because not
and it
everybody knows to do that.
yeah, and I just feel so bad for him. It's like, "Oh my god, I know what it's like," because even now, if I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, because sometimes we have the brainless projects and it's happy, and we're happy to be brainless in them. But then there are other ones that just require that a bit of attention. And
Uh-huh.
even now I find myself where I'm like, okay, well, that bobble's not going in the right spot. What is going on? And I do it quite often, actually. I'm now that I'm thinking about it. If it's something where things are changing as I'm going along, and if I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, because that happens a lot, I've discovered that I'm very, like, kind of, all over the place with my brain. So there are times when I'm just not thinking about what I'm doing. So, I end up screwing up my pattern, and it's okay. If you especially if you are getting to it and you see that you're like, "Well, that doesn't look like it goes there." Some people will push past and, "Well, it'll line up, eventually it'll cut."
Oh gosh.
No. Stop what you're doing, count your work, go back and fix it,
Stop and wait, let me pull it up. Count, count, then
and count
count
some
some
more.
more. Don't
Yep.
it's like frogging. It is a necessary evil. You
Mhm,
gotta do it. You gotta be willing to do it
mhm,
because ultimately we're not crocheting just to crank stuff out.
mhm.
We take pride in our work and we want to be able to have a
Absolutely.
finished project that is worthy of all the time that we spent.
Yep.
So counting is where it's at.
And I've always said, this is just a personal pride thing. If my name's going on it, I want it to be perfect.
Mhm.
And I know that not everything I make is absolutely perfect, but I want it to look its very best. Another thing too is if you find yourself not wanting to count, I mean, and we've said this before, especially when we were talking about different tools to use. Um, Go through, look at the pattern and mark in spots, use stitch markers to mark the spots where
Mhm.
special things are supposed to go. And
Mhm.
that way, when you hit that, if things are not lining up where they're supposed to be, you know exactly what happened. You know where you're
Mhm.
at, and you just have to go back and review. And it'll actually save you time in the long run. And it will keep you from making great big mistakes because great big
Yeah.
mistakes are sometimes really hard to overcome.
Yes, and even frogging can be impossible at that
Oh,
point.
yeah. And
So,
especially if
and
you're the kind of person who just you need that affirmation from your project because a lot of people do this for relaxation. They're not looking to have a headache on their hands.
exactly. No headaches
Well,
here.
yeah,
Oh
you're
my
saving
goodness.
you from headaches.
This next tip was one that you had brought to my attention. I really love this one. I think I'm going to adopt it
Mhm,
in my own work. Make the first stitch of the row in the same stitch as the turning chain.
mhm,
And that the caveat is even if the designer has said not to. And why
mhm.
would you do that?
Yeah, because, if you just give yourself a little bit of a chain to bring it up so that your stitch isn't, squished to the bottom, then it's the whole thing. And for me, I don't care for because even when I'm working in the round, I do this. When I make a magic ring, I will chain that 3, and a lot of people will use that as their first double crochet, except that when
Mm,
you go to join with that chain 3, it creates this funky hole. I
yeah.
don't like it. It's so irritating to me. So I will start with the actual double crochet, and if it says 16 double crochets, that means there's a chain 3 in there as well as 16 double crochets.
Yes, and I have seen designers push that chain 3 to the back of the work
Mhm.
so it's not visible. So when you do the join in the first actual double crochet,
Yes.
then that is pushed to the back and no longer a part of the work. I've
Yes.
also seen suggestions of you were talking about shortening the turning chain.
Mhm.
Sometimes I've seen suggested that you take, say, for a double crochet, just chain 1, but pull it up a little bit
Yes.
higher
Yep.
so you don't get that dreaded short stitch at the beginning of the
Right.
row.
Right, but it still allows you the opportunity to work in that first stitch, and for me, that's a big thing. I like working into that first stitch no matter what I'm working on. And sometimes I will get a tiny little pook at the side. It usually doesn't bother me because it's still, for me, relatively straight, and especially if I'm putting a border on it, I'm going to be
Mhm.
stitching pieces together. I just don't care about that. The only
Right.
time that really super straight edges matter is when it's gonna be exposed.
Like a scarf, for
Yes.
instance. Yeah.
Yeah, like, there are people who just they want it to look straight regardless, so you're going to have to play around with the stitches that you use in order to achieve that.
Mhm. Now, do you write that in your patterns? Do you actually say, like the ring,
Mhm.
12 double crochet, you can chain 3, but don't count it as a stitch? Do you actually
I
do that?
explain it. I do. I absolutely do because it's my own personal quirk. However, I explain why,
Mhm,
and I will say, if you choose, you can choose to use this as a stitch if you want. However, here's why I don't, and I tell them why. So people know that if I'm starting with a chain 3, typically it's not gonna be used as a stitch, depending on where we are and what we're doing, because I will use it as a stitch on occasion.
that's the beauty of having people who have done our patterns more than once. They
Yeah.
start to understand what our little quirks are. I try to be as industry-wide, um, as I can,
Yeah.
adopt all of those principles, but our experience, even if you're not a crochet designer, your experience
Mhm.
informs your crochet.
For sure.
And if you find something that's more successful or in your eyes than what you see in the pattern, and it doesn't drastically affect stitch counts or stitch
Right.
patterns or that sort of thing, do it.
Yeah, and if I mean, like,
Absolutely
if
do
you're
it.
not completely altering what you're trying to achieve. If you're
Mhm.
looking at a picture and you're like, "Well, this isn't turning out," but you've done something really weird on the end of your well, that would be why.
All right, we have a bonus tip.
We do. We
Ooh,
do?
it's
Okay.
fabulous,
We
but
do.
not everybody's gonna like it.
I see it,
It's
I saw it.
it's practice. It's practice.
Stop it!
Okay,
What?
so I okay, so I was my first career, my first life was as a singer, classical singer. I sang opera recitals, concerts with orchestra, blah blah blah, and I taught voice lessons. And the guiding principle of a musician's life is practice. Now,
Mhm.
the adage "practice makes perfect" is baloney,
Yeah, because if you
because it
practice it
doesn't.
wrong, you still
It makes but the
perfect practice
10,000.
makes perfect.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Wait,
My
let
husband's,
me,
I can't claim it.
I it's um, but that 10,000 hours of doing something over and over again over time really does give you the mastery that
Yep.
you're looking for. We could apply this to just about anything in crochet. Why is my tension not even? Why
Mhm.
why do my stitches not all look the same? Why, all of those whys.
Yes.
They're all solved by intentionally doing them over and over
Yes.
consistently, not being frustrated and throw it away the instant you hit something that doesn't
Mhm.
suit fancy or doesn't quite work out. So getting a straight edge, you
Mhm.
and I have both experimented with our own preferences, and we've come up with what works for us after
Mhm.
hours of trying.
Yes. Well, and just doing it the way that you're told to begin with. I mean, there's nothing wrong with just following the pattern and listening to what they say, you know?
Exactly.
However, if you
exactly.
get to the end of it and you're like, well, I just don't really like the way that that looks, or this doesn't make me happy, then work on changing it.
Yeah. So those are some life lessons apparently. We should we should do some life lessons that we learn through
There we go.
crochet, and here
I mean, this
that's
is
one of
supposed
our
to be therapy, right? Craft is therapy.
honey, it's my therapy.
Yes.
I love the old adage, it's cheaper than therapy. Anybody who says that doesn't know a crocheter because it's not.
Mhm.
I mean, look at your wall of yarn, look at my wall of yarn. Look, you can't see
Right?
the rest of my room, which is covered with yarn. It's not cheaper than
Hold on there.
therapy. It's just more fun.
Yes. Well, okay. However, depending on the doctor that you're going to, upwards of $200 an hour, I still think
Okay.
my yarn is cheaper and it goes further
Okay.
and
All
lasts
right.
longer.
It does.
Oh, well.
And I don't pay $200 for the yarn for one project. I might spend
No,
$200 on multiple projects,
exactly.
but
See, it goes further, lasts
it's
longer.
okay. Point taken. It is cheaper than therapy, but we're
And
not going to stop practicing.
it's even better than eating your feelings away like I used to do because cake only lasts so long and it makes you feel bad. Yarn lasts like forever.
Now, it does make you feel bad if you just bought a batch of yarn and you go, "Ooh, I like that one better." That kinda
Mm,
stinks. But,
yes.
anyway,
Yeah,
those are our tips.
sure.
I'm gonna recap real fast.
Yeah.
So we start and end each row in the same stitch. We adjust the turning chain if we feel we need to. We
Mhm,
substitute an alternate stitch for the turning chain.
mhm.
And by the way, I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel for the stacked single crochet, so check it out. We
Yes.
count, and then count some more, and we make the first stitch of the row in the same stitch as the turning chain. Now, not all of them at once.
Mhm.
Try what works.
Yeah.
Go down the list, land on 1, 2,
Mhm.
3, whatever, and there you go. I
Yep.
would say
Use
the
the happy
count
spot.
and the practice, absolutely adopt those.
Mhm.
Don't get rid of them, but everything
Yeah,
else, figure out what you want.
for sure. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Because it like we always say, it's all extremely personal and you find what you love and make it your own.
Mhm, absolutely.
Alrighty.
And all right, Biz, we weren't as TV worthy this week as we usually are because we're both
No.
tired and busy, but that
Mhm.
happens. But we decided that we were going to start watching Based on a True Story. That's the title of the
Mhm.
show, a comedy on Peacock.
Mhm.
And it stars Kaylee Cuoco of Big
Mhm.
Bang Theory fame. And honestly, I'm not going to remember any of the other names. I recognize the actors, but yeah, well, yeah,
I'm
but
definitely a faces more than names kind of person.
exactly. Yeah. So they go, oh, the actor who we watch Jeopardy all the time. Oh, the actor who plays the lead in blah blah blah. And I go, I watch that show all the time. I don't know what his name. I
I have
don't
no
even know
idea who it is though.
what's his character's name. But I can see him walking. It's just
Yes.
whatever. But you had a slightly different
Yeah.
experience with it than I did. So tell me how you felt.
Okay, so are you sure we should start with mine?
You want to start with mine?
Yeah. Let's get let's get the
I'm
good
actually going
version.
to start with the end of it of the first
Okay.
episode. We had agreed to watch 2 episodes because we found with new shows, the first episode, it's really hard to just
Yeah.
fall in love with a show right off the bat. There are
Mhm.
those that will do that, but generally it takes a couple episodes to kind of see how things are going to play out.
Mhm.
But neither one of us, well, you got into the second episode only after taking a nap during the
Yeah.
first one, so that
Completely by
doesn't count.
accident.
That doesn't count. I will say that I did enjoy it, and one of the things that made me enjoy it was I had started watching it while my husband was out of the room. Now,
Mhm.
we watch TV together every night, and if I'm going to replace live baseball, he better like the show I'm watching. So, just saying. So, I was watching this just right before dinner, and he walks in on the end of it, and he actually kinda liked it, so I'm going, "This is great. I've got another one we can watch together."
It's a new one.
But I will say it was weird seeing Kaylee in this role. I
Mhm,
almost feel like she tried a little bit too hard, but she calmed down during the at the toward the end of the episode. Um,
mhm,
the thing that drove me a little bit crazy about it, and really it's just a personal thing on my end,
mhm.
given the age that I am, and no, I'm not sharing that because nobody needs to know that.
Oh,
Uh, Ageism is big in this, and they're not that old. I mean, she's pregnant, she must
yeah,
be probably late 30s, early 40s, and he says he's approaching 50. I'm sorry, but that is not old. That's the
yeah,
prime of whatever we're doing,
yep.
and ageism is driving the conversation. He
Mm,
loses
I didn't
his
even
job,
see that.
his position. You didn't get that part?
No,
Oh,
but I'm
see, this
glad you
is
brought it up.
Oh, see, this is a big pet peeve of mine.
Okay,
Don't tell me that I can't do something because I'm the age I am,
yeah,
especially if I've been doing that thing, perfecting it for years and years.
yeah.
I am way better than a 20 something. Sorry, but
Oh,
do you
the
remember
tennis
that?
thing.
The
Okay,
tennis thing.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
he
yeah.
was, they were trying to make it sound like he was a failed tennis star,
Yeah,
but
I
it was
didn't
because he
understand that
blew out his
either.
knee. He blew out his knee, so he had to give up his career and do
Yeah,
teaching. See, that
mhm.
also lit me up like a fire because, um, there's that old adage, those who um,
Oh, those who
do
can't do
do it
teach.
and they can't teach. Well,
Mhm.
I'm a perfect example of someone who did it and taught, so
Yeah.
don't tell me that either. Um, so that part, it wasn't a bad part, it was just how they were
Mhm.
setting up the characters.
Yeah.
Really lit my flame, it just lit me on
Mhm.
fire because those are hot button issues for me. But
Mhm.
they kinda got over that because Kaylee and her husband sort of proved themselves. Um,
Mhm.
and I kinda think the premise of the show, while it might be short-lived that they're gonna get any traction out of it, I do think it has possibilities. But you
Mm,
had a different take on it.
mhm.
Do tell.
Um, yeah, I didn't I wasn't let's see, let me start at the beginning. Yes, I agree and can see where you say that, Kaylee Cuoco seemed like she was trying too hard. It seemed like there was an awful lot of quirky Penny in this character, and she could have made it something very different. Um, the other thing that you have a pet peeve about ageism. I have a pet peeve about, marriages and relationships and, um, making the assumption that everybody is looking to sleep around.
Yeah. Oh, that was
And
big.
that was very much an underlying tone. Here we have this pregnant woman, and I'm not gonna tell you what happens, but, it shoots to a scene that to me was kind of gross and inappropriate, um, in something that was happening in her mind. And then later on, uh, where the husband wasn't looking for somebody else, they made it look like he was looking for somebody else, and that now there's this question in her mind about his fidelity. And I just have issues with that because, while there are marriages out there that are like that, not every marriage is like that.
No,
Not everybody's looking for somebody else.
and I almost feel like in a show like that, they're using it as a device to get people on board.
Yes,
That
like,
it's a
stop it.
hook, and I on it turns me off too. I was glad to
Mhm.
see at the end that um, they didn't go any further with that,
Didn't
which
pursue
was
it, yeah.
no.
So, I mean, yes, I'm glad that I'm gonna have to just be completely honest. I didn't see the end of it because I slept through it. Um, I don't know if that was because the show didn't hold me or if it was just because I was really tired. Um, like I said, we've had puppy patrol, and she's kind of exhausting some days. So for me in the
Yeah,
afternoon, I have to sometimes sit down and just close my eyes for a minute. And I have a feeling that I just picked the wrong time to sit down and watch that show, and so I slept through the end of it, and I didn't see it. But
Well, I have the feeling that maybe we give it another try,
mhm,
and I will move on to the second episode. You would
mhm,
probably benefit from finishing out that
yeah,
first episode and going on to the second. But I think because of how the first episode ended, and I'm not gonna spoil that ending because you
okay,
slept through it,
yeah. We
um,
have to
there is possibility it could go one of 2 ways, and we'll
okay.
just see how that works out.
Well, I think maybe we should revisit this next week.
Let's do.
Let's do that. Let's
Let's
make a plan, and we'll revisit this show next week so that we can see whether or not this one is a continuer. Because there's a whole season.
There are yeah, and there are so many other shows, like Only Murder in the Building is coming back
Mm,
at the end of Ju and I'm watching one on A Apple TV called Truth Be Told. That's
mhm,
so good. Um, it's so engaging, and it's about murder and in a whole season,
mhm.
one crime this
Okay,
podcaster is um, trying to solve.
okay.
So it there are so many good shows out there. We don't
There
need to
are.
waste our time, but we're gonna give it another shot and see
Yep,
how it works.
yeah. And
Yep.
then, there's another one that I started watching that has to do with the recordings of the doctor that worked with, Ted Bundy,
Oh
and
gosh.
yeah, and so it's not it's I was afraid that it was just gonna be another thing of Ted Bundy's tapes because there's already stuff out there where they go through all of the hours of tapes of him, but it's not. It's based on this doctor and how he what he was doing and why he was interviewing these murderers and why he was like, what he was trying to do for psychology. So it's a little bit more interesting, if you're into documentaries, and I can't remember what it's called. It's
No,
like
I
something
think I remember seeing it.
something about the brain
It's
of a killer or the killer tapes or something like that, but I'll tell you guys next time, just
Mhm.
because I'm in the 2nd or 3rd episode, and it is interesting, but I would rather give you fuller information on that next time.
That sounds like a plan. And speaking of next time, we've
Yes.
got another rip-roaring topic for you.
Rip.
Should we share?
Right, sure. I think it's gonna
That
be
one
fun.
is oh, yeah. So it is yarn balls versus yarn cakes. And how do you wind your yarn? So we're
Which
going to
camp
show
do
you.
you sleep in?
Uh, I personally, we could do another one on skeins and
Oh
finding the
gosh.
beginning of the skein. We might even put that
Mhm.
in. Ew, right.
I mean, okay, I love they're so darn cute, like these little
Yeah,
twisties.
yeah.
Wonderful. They're just cute to look at and hold and squish, and I hate unraveling them. Oh my god.
I know there is a technique to it because I've seen somebody kind of offhand. They hook it to a spinner. They hold one end, they hook it to a spinner, and it
Ah,
spins it, and then they fold it in half and
okay,
tuck it.
fancy.
But yeah, I can't do that. I can't
There's
do
only
that.
been one yarn dyer that I've ever been able to, actually unravel without it get turning into a ball of knots, and I'll tell you her next week. We'll talk about her
All right,
next
we're gonna talk about that next Friday. So grab your favorite drink. This is water,
Yes.
by the way. Yeah, the other stuff comes later. Um, and join us because we'll be live in your favorite Facebook group, either mine or Biz's,
Mhm.
also live on YouTube.
On
And
YouTube.
we're going to solve all the issues about how to use balls versus cakes. It's going to be
Yes.
great.
Yes. Yes.
All right. I think
I
that's it for
I
us
like them all,
today.
but
Oh, yeah. Honey, pretty yarn is pretty yarn. Figure out how to use Yeah, whatever form it comes in, I'm gonna make it work. So
absolutely.
that's next week's episode. So see you in
Yes.
2 weeks. No, I'm just kidding. That's We're gonna work with it all. So,
That's so funny.
okay. All right, Biz. I think it's time for us to head off to our respective Florida and Pennsylvania places.
Mhm.
But for
I'm sure
now,
my
we're gonna
dog need
say,
to go out.
oh, I'm sorry.
More mosquito bites.
Okay. On that note, it was great to see you, Biz, and to talk to
Yes,
you for this time and to see
same
all of
here.
you. So we hope to see you next time on There's No
There's
Crying
no
in
crying in
Crochet.
crochet.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.